Okay, for our French braid block, you're going to need your hoop scissors. Here's my completed block. And then you're going to need your Vanish Light water-soluble thread. You're going to need your thread and matching bobbin, embroidery bobbin thread, and you will need your piece of prepared wool that's been pressed around the edges, your backing fabric, and 3 strips of fabric. And the width of the fabric is on your it's in your instructions, so you can look at, I think, I'm not sure which page, second or third page of your instructions. And then you'll need to have your battleizer hooped. So we can begin sewing our block. For step 1, it's going to start out like all of our other blocks. We're going to sew a placement stitch using water-soluble thread in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin. Step 2 is where we're going to place our optional wool, and it's been pre-cut and prepared and pressed on the edges, and we're going to continue with the water-soluble thread, and it'll sew a zigzag to hold it in place. You're going to want to make sure you have your presser foot raised to the highest position. Help keep it from getting caught in the wool. Step 3, we're going to continue with water-soluble thread, and we're going to sew the pattern onto the wool. And again, if you have your presser foot in the highest position, you have a lesser chance of the foot getting caught in the wool. And another remedy of that is just to kind of push the wool down ahead of the foot. And step 4, we're going to tack down using water-soluble thread still, fabric 1. So you're just going to place it right over the area where it belongs and sew a tack down stitch. And then I'm going to trim 1/4 of an inch away, and that'll be my seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch inside here. This looks pretty good. That might need a little trim. Any area on the outside of our triangle block, I'm going to trim it 1/2 inch. For step 5, you're going to need your fabric 2, and you're also going to need to change the thread in your needle to a regular sewing thread. And what you're going to do here with your fabric 2 is you're going to flip it right side down. You're going to place it raw edges even. You're going to make sure that once it's flipped that you have sufficient coverage on the outside of your block, leaving 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and also that you cover the entire section right there. So I think we are good to go. And we're going to sew a seam. And the next step, we're going to flip our fabric right side up, finger press, smooth it out, and we're going to sew a tack down stitch, still using the same thread. And now we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch on any edge on the inside of the block. For step 7, you're going to take your fabric 3 and turn it right side down, and this is going to go in this area, so we're going to place it right side down raw edges even, and again just take care that when you flip it that you've covered every portion of that section. So I think I'm ready to go and I can sew my seam. And then step 8, you're going to flip that fabric right side up and finger press it and smooth it out and sew a tack down. And so now we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch on the inside of the block. And on the outside of the block, there's the edge of my block. You're going to want to trim it probably anywhere from 1/4 to half an inch. Leave all that on the outside. So there we are. Step 9, you're going to take your fabric 1. It's the pink for me, and you're going to lay it right side down, raw edges even for another seam. Again, just double checking to make sure once I turn it right side up that it is definitely covering the right area. Just clip that little thread tail, and now we can flip our fabric right side up and finger press it, smooth it out, and sew a tack down. Trim any area on the inside of the block. I'm going to trim to 1/4 of an inch and then leave this outside area. I'm just going to leave there. You would typically, your goal is to leave anywhere from 1/4 to half an inch, but I'm just going to leave all that for right now and we'll trim it later. Step 11, we're back to fabric 2, doing a seam right here to cover this section. So right side's down. And again, just a little double check and definitely good. Right side down, raw edges even, and stitch the seam. For step 12, we're going to flip the fabric right side up. You guys probably know the drill by now. Finger press, smooth it out, and sew the tack down. The only place I really need to trim here is about 1/2 inch, give or take a little bit because it can be trimmed later, but we're just going to cut the edge of the block. It's looking good here, and this here at the bottom, that can be trimmed later once the block is complete. I'm back to fabric 1, doing a seam in this corner right here. So right side down, raw edges even, and I'll stitch the seam. Now there's no tack down for this corner, but I am going to finger press and I am going to trim it to follow about 1/2 inch on the outside of this block. And there's no tack down because we're going to actually tack that corner down at the same time that we add our backing fabric, and that's coming up in I think one more step, and then we'll add the backing fabric. So right now we're going to do the seam. That's going to cover this section. So I'll put my hoop back on, and this is step 14, and we're using fabric 3. So again, it's right side down with the raw edges even, and we sew a seam. Cut that little thread tail. And again, no tack down because we're going to do that with the next step, but I am going to finger press it. And I'm going to find the edge of my block, and I'm going to cut this and trim it again about 1/2 inch from the block, the edge of the block. And now we're going to add our backing fabric. So here's my backing fabric, and I've sprayed the other side of it with a little Sulky KK 2000, which is a temporary spray adhesive. And I'm just going to center my backing fabric over our triangle block, and I always peek underneath to make sure I have about the same amount of fabric on all sides and all corners. So when it's looking good, just to smooth it out gently, don't push on it or anything. And now we can flip it right side up again and put the hoop back on the machine. Okay, step 15 is we've put the backing fabric on the back. I'm going to peek underneath the hoop, and it looks like my backing is still in the right place. I've changed to water-soluble thread in the needle, and so now we're going to go ahead and sew a basting stitch that holds the backing fabric on. And it's also going to tack down our corners. So we're going to want to make sure that they're smoothed out as we go stitching over them. So our backing fabric is on. There's a little peek of our backing fabric on. Now what we're going to do is we're getting ready for the quilting portion. So I'll just adjust the camera so you can see. We're going to change our bobbin thread, and we're going to make sure that we match our needle and bobbin thread for the quilting portion. Okay, so we're ready for our final step, step number 16, and I have matching bobbin and needle thread, and we're going to stitch the quilting. One thing I haven't done is I'm going to turn off my automatic thread cutter, which I can do from my setting menu. There it is. And I'm also going to do needle down, needle up, and pull my bobbin thread to the top. By doing those two things, you end up with a much better, cleaner looking back that just doesn't have the bird nests and stuff, and it looks much better. So we'll just sit here and watch it quilt. Here is our completed French braid block. Say that 3 times fast. And what we're going to do is we're going to trim 1/2 inch past this basting stitch through all the layers on all 3 sides. And so I'm going to line up my basting stitch with the 1/2 inch mark, and I'm going to trim this off. I'm just going to make the rounds on all those sides. And again, that's 1/2 inch. I'm like double checking myself. 1/2 inch on all 3 sides through all the layers. It's a little bit different joining method than our sashing on the back only. This is going to have sashing on the front and on the back. So there's our completed French braid. As you can see, there's some corners where there's just battleizer or no fabric showing. So don't worry about that, because your sashing will be stitched right on that basting stitch, and we'll show you how to do that later. And there's our back. So there is our beautiful French braid block.